When you say nation, you talk about land. Our land is Africa. That's undeniable. This land is not our land.
That what Frantz Fanon's theory, psychological theory, is that we're in a post-colonial psychology. And what he calls that is an auto-destructional stage, which is the oppressor will oppress for so long that the oppressed no longer have to be physically oppressed. They do it to themselves automatically.
I'm black. Do you hear me, man? Do you understand? I am black. I'm a nigga. Do you understand me? I was born black. I live black. And I'm gonna die probably because I'm black. Because some cracker that knows I'm black better than you, nigga, is probably gonna put a bullet in the back of my head.
Hey, man, it's like this, man. It's like, you know, it's like it's revolution time, man. There's no questions asked. Revolution is here. You know what I'm saying? We the youth, we the young. It's time for us to break loose, you know? We don't have no freedom, no rights, man. We slaves right now. Everybody's still a slave. That's what they told us today. In other words, you still a slave. No matter how much money you got, you still ain't shit. So, you know, it's on, just like that. Just like
are really ready and willing to pay the price that is necessary for freedom. Our people will always be walking around here second-class citizens, or what you call 20th century slaves.
What price are you talking about, sir?
The price of freedom is death.
What's the figure?
I mean, what are you in this for? You want power, you want revenge, you know? What is it?
It's simple, Willie. I just want to be free.
Hey, peace, family. Uhuru, Amani, Nanguvu. Peace to the family. Welcome to another powerful discussion we're going to have here on We Charge Colonialism, where We Charge Colonialism, a media outlet, combating colonial media, false narratives about African people, stereotypes, things that the colonial media tends to do when it pertains to African people, which is undermine our struggle for liberation, for decolonization, decolonizing the minds and bodies of African people. With that being said, you know, today's discussion this is going to be a tough discussion for me, even starting this podcast as I was about to go into, about to hit that go live. I felt drained, but you know, I wanted to have this discussion because I thought it would be important to just give a perspective, and I hope those who view this podcast, view this discussion, will leave with another perspective. I hope to, you know, raise consciousness, man, to people. You know, I know a lot of people who probably will come and view this podcast probably on the same wavelength as I am, but you know, hopefully this podcast will reach those people who need to see another perspective, one that's not put out there in the mainstream media. So, you know, with that being said, a peace to the family. Make sure y'all like and share this podcast. Make sure you subscribe if you're not already subscribed to our channel. And we're going to get into it, man. I don't plan to make this a long podcast, but we'll see what happens. There's a few things I do want to go over. And when it comes to the situation with, not the situation, but the murder of Jordan Neely. So rest in power to Jordan Neely, a homeless man who was murdered in New York City on the New York City subway. And that's been the talk for like the last week. It's been all over the news. Everybody has had an opinion about what happened with Jordan Neely. And Eric Adams had an opinion as well, which I want to, you know, discuss and look at his response, particularly his response to Alexandria Cortez, who came out and identified what took place as a murder of this homeless black man, or this unhoused black man. So, you know, before I do that, I originally titled this podcast Sambo Adams, and I changed the name, right? It was Sambo Adams, The Curious Case of Sambo Adams and Jordan Neely. And the reason why I changed the name, because I really don't like referring to our people by derogatory stereotypes and terms like Uncle Tom, Sambo, coon. You'll rarely hear me use those terms, especially in public when referring to our people. And one of the reasons, I don't like using those terms is because I know what colonialism has done to African people. And many of our people are sick. Dr. Bobby E. Wright talked about this when he talked about menticide. And it doesn't mean that we don't fight against, Africans who are working against the interests of the African working class, working against the interests of African liberation. But, I think there could be opportunities for us to win some of these Africans who are victims of colonialism, just like all of us. So, I try to keep that in mind when dealing with our people. So, but with that being said, though, I think it's important too to understand those characteristics of the Uncle Toms, of the Sambos, and of the Coons, because there are characteristics that we need to identify to be able to call it out when we see it. Maybe not by those terms, but we know who we're dealing with, and we deal with them accordingly. And so I want to just pull up this is a short piece that goes into the differences, particularly of Coon and Sambo. And like I said, I really want us to look at those characteristics. And when we do, if we do use it and we do hear it, we know the difference. Hold on. What just happened? Okay. All right. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Let me see. Peace, Yapo. You said, brother, teacher Jore, would it be possible to one day do a podcast examining the effects of collective trauma on our people? I have yet to hear a discussion on the subject. Say less, say less. Now I'm going to have to work on it now. We're going to make that happen. We're going to make that happen. I got to make a note of that. Make a note of that. We're going to do a podcast on collective trauma. I'm trying to think if we've done anything on that, though. Now I have to think back, because I feel like we've had a podcast on it, but I'm gonna put some thought into that. So let me share my screen real quick. This is characteristics of a Coon and a Sambo. And again, I'm not encouraging anyone to go out there, say these might be things I'll say, in private. But I think we have to do a better job when it comes to coming out in public and disparaging and using derogatory terms when dealing with our people. But at least that's my approach. I wouldn't tell you how to handle people who are working against the interests of Africans. So right here, I'm going to read this. The Coon caricature is one of the most insulting of all anti-Black caricatures. The name itself, an abbreviation of raccoon, is dehumanizing as, oh man, I got to get my glasses together. Hold on. Let me read that again. The name itself, an abbreviation of raccoon, is dehumanizing. As with Sambo, the Coon was portrayed as a lazy, easily frightened, chronically idle, inarticulate buffoon. The Coon differed from the Sambo in subtle but important ways. Sambo was depicted as a perpetual child not capable of living as an independent adult. The Coon acted childish, but he was an adult, albeit a good for little adult. Sambo was portrayed as a loyal and contented servant. Indeed, Sambo was offered as a defense for slavery and segregation. Right? Sambo was offered as a defense forced slavery, and segregation. How bad could these institutions have been, asked the racialist, if blacks were contented, even happy, being servants? That's why, like, even in the book Uncle Tom, you know, many people make the mistake when they're calling sellouts and so forth Uncle Tom. Really, you really want to call him the Sambo if you want to call him anything, because Sambo was like the race trader in the book. When it comes to Uncle Tom, and I think one of the things like Malcolm X, when he had this critique of black leaders and was calling them Uncle Toms, it's because of Uncle Tom's approach to the institution of slavery. Uncle Tom being a Christian and a passive, but Uncle Tom, you know, was against the system of slavery. You know, Uncle Tom would even help other enslaved Africans escape from the institution of slavery, right? But it was this passive approach that he had, and you know, and the Christian principles, right, that Malcolm X was critiquing when he said Uncle Tom. Now, Sambo, on the other hand, was a race trader. He worked against it, and he was the one who would sell out, who would tell if someone was trying to escape. Uncle Tom would, at least Uncle Tom wouldn't, you know, he would assist if he could. But Sambo, on the other hand, would snitch. He would turn you in to the authorities, to the enemy. That was Sambo. All right. So the coon, although he often worked as a servant, was not happy with his status. He was simply too lazy or too cynical to attempt to change his lowly position. Also, by the 1900s, Sambo was identified with older, docile blacks who accepted Jim Crow laws and etiquette, whereas coons were increasingly identified with young urban blacks who disrespected whites. Stated differently, the coon was a Sambo gone bad. All right. And so that was short. I think there's some other characteristics that could be pointed out when it comes to these two stereotypes. But when we're talking about the Sambo, I think one thing to keep in mind, especially in this discussion, is the neo-colonialist. The neo-colonialist will be considered a Sambo. This is someone who's not fighting to dismantle the system, the colonial system. Right? He's not looking to dismantle the system that oppresses and exploits African people. He's looking to work with it, be a part of it, right? That is the Sambo. So I bring that up just to look at Eric Adams, and I'm not calling him the Sambo, but you know, he has the tendencies of a Sambo. So I want to pull up this particular article on the Eric Adams and his statement about what happened to Jordan Neely. And Jordan Neely was murdered, not what happened to him, the murder of Jordan Neely. I think it's important that, you know, the language we use when describing this, because they're very careful in choosing the words that they choose when describing what happened with Jordan Neely. So let me go here. For instance, like what happened with Jordan Neely, some newspapers talked about Jordan Neely died. You know, Jordan Neely died on the subway. Not that he was killed, not that he was murdered, right? Not that he was choked to death. That Jordan Neely died on. Yeah, he died at the hands of, you know, this ex-Marine. They keep on putting that ex-Marine, right? Very careful. You know, they want you to know that, you know, this guy was a Marine. He served the country. They want you to know that, right? So Mayor Adams, and I seen one newspaper I'll get into in a minute, but the headline says, you know, man convicted had 42 arrests. That was in the headline. I don't see too many of those headlines anymore, but I know that they're out there. And this is because of the pushback. This is because the people were pushing back against this narrative that they were attempting to put out, because they want us to have a view of what happened to Jordan Neely. They wanted to project this image of Jordan Neely as sort of this criminal who deserved what he got. So this is Mayor Adams. He rips AOC, this is Alexandria Cortez, for rush to conclude that Jordan Neely was murdered. Right. So I just want to look at it, a little bit of this. So Mayor Eric Adams has ripped Rep. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for rushing to conclude that Jordan Neely was murdered when he was put in a chokehold by a Marine. I mean, is there a question though? Are they questioning? This is the problem that I had. Like, there's video that's obvious that this man was murdered. You know, let me do this.
They're not guilty. Stevie Wonder can see these motherfuckers are guilty.
I had to do that, man, because it's clear as day that these people murdered. The whole world's seen it, right? So, you know, for Alexandria Cortez, I mean, she came out and described what happened. She called it for what it was. He was killed. This man was killed, Jordan Neely. And Eric Adams is coming out and he's playing it safe, and he's attacking Alexandria Cortez for calling this what it was. So let me read a little bit of this. All right, please. All right. So Mayor Eric Adams has ripped Alexandria Cortez for rushing to conclude that Jordan Neely was murdered when he was put in a chokehold by a Marine. By a Marine. Hey, y'all hear this, right? You know, I wonder, you know, if it was a bus driver, you know, what they would have said, put in a chokehold by a bus driver, put in a chokehold by a secretary. I can imagine that they wouldn't put that there. His owner criticized the progressive lawmaker along with city comptroller Brad Lander, who claimed people are cheering how the troubled 30-year-old homeless man was choked to death by a vigilante without consequence. I don't think that's very responsible at the time where we are still investigating the situation, Adams said on CNN Primetime late Wednesday when asked about both inflammatory tweets. I mean, even the corridor said that, not the corridor, is it the corridor? I think so, who examined the body, did the autopsy, said it was murder, right? They ruled it a homicide, right? And this might have been after Eric Adams said what he said, but they found out what everybody saw from the videotape. You know, like nobody was. We didn't even need to hear that it was, you know, a homicide. They didn't even have to rule it for us. We had all the evidence we need in the video. So let's let the DA conduct his investigation with the law enforcement officials. To really interfere with that is not the right thing to do. I'm going to be responsible and allow them to do their job and allow them to determine exactly what happened here, the mayor stressed. The rush to conclusions was particularly irresponsible from Landers, who started his tweet by saying that NYC is not Gotham because the comptroller, citywide leader, noted Adams. He's talking about, like, hey, you know, these people out here playing Batman. I mean, look at, come on now. And it was 3 guys. It was 3 people on Jordan Neely, right? Is the man fearing for his life? He don't look like he's fearing for his life. I mean, there's videos where, you know, it looked like he's enjoying himself doing this. This doesn't look like a man who's in fear of his life, that he's scared. He has everything under control. He has everything. Oh, the coroner. Yeah. All right. He has everything under control. Right. So, and he's choking this man for 15 minutes. If you're choking someone for 15 minutes, what do you expect to happen? Right. What you expect to happen? I mean, you can put a man to sleep after by choking a man after a minute or two, right? And cutting off a man's oxygen. We used to do things, little tricks back in the day where we would put people in chokeholds or press their chest, cut off their oxygen after a minute, 2 minutes. They sleep, they out for the count. We probably could have killed each other. Oh man, the things that children do. But we was playing those dangerous games growing up. And here you go. This is a Marine. He has this man unhoused man in this chokehold for 15 minutes. We don't know exactly what happened here. We do know what happened. We don't. Okay, what happened prior to that? It was a man who was hungry, who probably wanted to be arrested, was yelling for food. What he said? He said, I don't care, arrest me, or something, along those lines. This is a man who was begging to be arrested. He probably was looking for housing and 3 hots in the cot, they would say, right? He probably was looking for 3 hots in the cot. Who knows, right? I was on the train the other day in Philadelphia, and I'm on the train. The man gets on. I don't know if he's unhoused. He definitely was dealing with some mental and emotional problems. He gets on the train and he begins to do some stuff with his hands, and it's obvious that there's something going on, right? And he begins to yell, and so everybody's just okay. Let him get it out. Nobody was sitting there. Nobody was. It might have been people annoyed or frustrated, that this man is just yelling on the train, but nobody is, looking to put this man in a chokehold or feel like they're in danger, right? And I think like there's a different way that we respond to our community than people outside of our community, and I think that's something else to keep in mind in this situation, because I lived in New York. I work in New York, currently. So I'm always in New York City. I've been in New York City since 2002 on those trains. On those trains, Dylan I probably done seen Jordan. He probably yelled in my face one time. I don't know. Right. I've been on trains where these things happen. This has been normalized. Right. And so, what this guy who had the audacity to just grab this man and choke him out, this is what we have to be concerned about when we're dealing with things like ethnic cleansing, what they call gentrification, where our communities, we're dealing with people of another culture who may have another set of rules and also look at us as less than, this dehumanizing of Black bodies under colonialism makes what happened to Jordan Neely seem justified. And I'm going to get to that too in a minute in Dr. Amerson Wilson's book, who's going to break this down. I'm going to go to this section where he says white domination, Black criminality. White domination, Black criminality. But before I get to that, again, going to how they talked about Jordan Neely's past. And Jordan Neely has been arrested 42 times, right? And I even seen some social media posts and people, they ran with that narrative. Oh, he's been arrested 40. They didn't even need to know what he's been arrested for. They did talk about an assault that he was arrested for, right? And this is going to be tried to be used to justify what happened that day when Jordan Neely was murdered. You can't take what this man had done in the past and justify his murder on that day. You can't do that with him. You can't take nobody's past and try to use that against them, especially. Especially if there's something that that they're no longer dealing with. Talking about, and I mean, like there was no arrest, or he's currently going to trial for. Even none of that is justified, right? We're talking about a man who was arrested 42 times, but he's on the streets. If Jordan Neely was such a threat and he was so bad, then why is he walking the public? Why is he walking out in the public freely then? Right? So, and we all know that people get these infractions and arrested. I mean, we are criminalized, right? And Jordan Neely, obviously, like they talked about his mental health issues, so he's dealing with mental health issues. He's unhoused, so he's out there in the streets. He could have been arrested for anything: sleeping on the train, sleeping in the park, getting all these, doing something so that he's arrested, right? And so that he can have a roof over his head and have some food, right? And again, he's dealing with mental health issues. So, yeah, he may have been arrested 42 times. But, for a man that's been arrested 42 times, if he's so bad, he's out there in the streets, y'all letting him walk freely, right? So you can't use that against him. And if anything, now that I said that, now let's get to the heart of it, though. If anything, it exposes the contradiction, right? It exposes a problem with the system. It exposes colonialism, right? Because that's the root of all of this. That's the root of all of this. Why is Jordan Neely with mental not being treated for his mental health? Why is he unhoused? Why has he been arrested 42 times and that has not been addressed by the community? No transformative justice, no, well, I don't know. Let me not assume anything, come to any conclusions, but I know how the system works, right? And so we're looking at the failure of the system, if anything, the failure to address the needs of the masses, the needs of that particular community, those who are unhoused, those who are dealing with mental health issues, and just dealing with poverty in general, right? Because they create the conditions in the first place. And if anything, Eric Adams should have been addressing that. He should have been addressing that contradiction, but he used this as an opportunity to say what they have been doing to the community and what they're going to do more of. Now he wants to have that conversation, right? He didn't want to address the murder. He wanted to deflect. He didn't want to address the contradictions with colonialism. But again, like going to the media. So let me go, because Malcolm X taught us. I want to play this clip, and so we know how the media works. But our ancestors, man, our elders, our ancestors, they already taught us. They already exposed. I'm still sharing my screen. Stop sharing. All right, so this is Malcolm X talking about the media.
We only mean vigorous action in self-defense. And that vigorous action, we feel, we're justified in initiating by any means necessary. And when we say this, the press calls us racists in reverse. With skillful manipulating of the press, they're able to make the victim look like the criminal and the criminal look like the victim. Right now, when in New York, we had a couple cases where the police grabbed the brother and beat him unmercifully, and then charged him with assaulting them. They used the press to make it look like he's the criminal and they're the victim. This is how they do it. And if you study how they do it here, then you'll know how they do it over here. It's the same game going all the time. And if you and I don't awaken and see what this man is doing to us, then it'll be too late. They may have the gas ovens already built before you realize that they're hot.
That's right. That's right. I mean, they trying to set us up for the murder. They're trying to set us up for genocide. I mean, this is a process that's been in place for decades, for 100. I mean, this is a process that's been in place since the enslavement of or the colonization and enslavement of African people. But you know, since the end of let's say formal colonialism, formal slavery, chattel slavery, they had to use other means to justify the subjugation of African people, the plight of African people the world over. They're in this situation or condition that they're in because there's something inherently wrong with them. There's something innate about them, you know, something about their culture. And this is projected through the media, right? And so, as Malcolm said, you know, they can make an angel look like a devil and make a devil look like an angel. So we have to be very conscious of that. But that, like, so let me go to, and I'm gonna end it with just some Dr. Amerson Wilson, man. That's always gold right there. So I want to read a few paragraphs of this White Domination, Black Criminality, and this is out of his book, Black on Black Violence: The Psychodynamics of Black Self-Annihilation in Service of White Domination. Right, and Dr. Amerson Wilson, throughout this book, he talks about how we relate to each other and how we interact with each other, and the violence we perpetrate against each other, the reasons for it, and who it's really serving at the end of the day. But in this particular section, he talks about this dynamic between white and Black and how Black people have been criminalized, so that we're looked at it in a certain way and we're treated in a particular way. So, you know, let me get to this. So he says the perpetual domination of African Americans by white Americans psychically requires the white American criminalization of the African male, that is, the white American perception of the African male as inherently criminal. In the context of white American domination, there is no innocent Black male, just Black male criminals who have not yet been detected, apprehended, or convicted. Their mere presence inspires in white Americans fears of being assaulted, raped, robbed, or some other indefinable dread of being criminally victimized. Fantasies of the sexual molestation of white females by rapacious Black males are common to the white American male and female consciousness and are frequent themes of their literary, cinematic, and pornographic productions. For a very large percentage of white Americans, young Black males, sexual promiscuity and criminality are synonymous. In the dominant white American consciousness, the African male is existentially guilty. That is, he is guilty by his mere existence for merely having the audacity of being alive. There is a pervasive feeling among many white Americans that their world would be much more secure if all young Black males were imprisoned, solitarily confined to their ghettos, or kept under constant surveillance. It is no quirky coincidence that such perceptions, feelings, and attitudes towards African American males occur most prevalently within the context of white American dominance. Ultimately, criminality of the Black male, regardless of its nature, truth or reality, resides in any act or attitude on the part of Black males, which appears to white Americans to defy white American authority, control, or dominance. It is white America which defines criminality and writes the criminal justice codes. It writes these codes not in the interest of justice as defined by its own moral code, but in the interest of maintaining, justifying, and enforcing its continued dominance of the African American community. In the interest of maintaining and justifying the continuity of the white American community, the African male is not only readily suspected of committing crimes, but is actively provoked and seduced into criminality by his white American accusers and persecutors. White America's need to dominate Black America creates the need to perceive the African male as criminal and to actualize African male criminality by socializing or ritualizing him into it by dint of judicial witchcraft. Such maneuvers are necessary in order to justify the white American community's repression of African Americans and psychodynamically defend the collective white American ego complex. The need to projectively perceive the African male as criminal, to psychosocially and political economically condition his criminality, is reflective of repressed white American guilt and criminality. The white American community must realize, though it will not admit it, that crimes committed in the service of white American domination, the rape and robbery of nations, the murder and exploitation of Native people in their lands, the denial of the humanity of non-European peoples, the enslavement, lynching, racial discrimination against and disenfranchisement of African Americans infinitely outweigh the alleged crimes of African American men. White American and European denial of their historical criminal subjugation and vicious exploitation of African peoples in their ongoing defense of their continuing criminal subordination of African peoples have psychically infected the African mind with a variant of white American/European communal psychopathology. Such Eurocentric psychopathology is manifested in Black on Black crime, the subject of this essay, right? And this last paragraph, it says, Black male criminality is the stepchild of white male criminality. The white male, in order to enhance and protect his self-image, enjoy the material wealth, power, and political advantages of his criminality, must deny truth and reality. He must not experience the guilty conscience, which will result from an acknowledgement and acceptance of his own criminality and psychopathy. His malevolent incrustations must be smooth over and his criminal dross transmuted to gold. The collective white American ego complex must deny and distort reality if it is to persist in perceiving itself as God's chosen, as sanctified in face of his beastification of the African Americans, particularly males, and its thingification of others, right? And I think like is really important. One point he was making, and it's really important to understand how white people reverse this criminality when it comes to African people, and of course, I mean, they are the colonizers, so they're not going to criminalize themselves. They're not going to indict themselves. But I think it's very important for us to be conscious of who the real criminals are. I mean, there's this history of criminal acts that Dr. Wilson points out to as it pertains to African people and indigenous people the world over. I mean, the theft of lands, enslavement, Jim Crow, all of these things, discrimination, genocidal acts against African people and other non-European people, all of these criminal acts, and they continue to commit these criminal acts to maintain their power and control over African lives. But what happens is the victim becomes criminalized. The victim, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, he says it best when in his Wolves excerpt. So anybody who's heard the Dead President's album, Dead Prez album, first album, Let's Get Free. And this was my first introduction to Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Is when I heard this album. I didn't know who he was at the time. But in the beginning of the album, there's the excerpt from his lecture, Black Power, which I'm going to do an analysis of on May 17th on this channel of that particular speech. Black Power is, one of his most powerful speeches to me, or lectures. But he talks about the wolf and how a hunter in the Arctic, in the Arctic, how he hunts a wolf is he has a double-edged blade and he puts the blade in ice, one part of the blade in the ice, and he puts blood on the other part of the blade and sticks out the ice, and the wolf comes along and he starts licking the blade and he cuts himself. He cuts his tongue while he's licking the blade, and he continues to lick the blade and lick the blade, and he thinks he's having a good meal, but he's killing himself in the process, right? And he uses this analogy when it comes to the Black community and how we harm ourselves through our actions, through Black communal violence or horizontal violence. I only say black on black because of the title of the book. But this intercommunal violence that exists in our community, right? The crimes perpetrated against our own people, right? The drugs that we sell to our own people, we sell death to our people. But these things are done because we feel like there's things that we are trying to attain in life that other people had, and we want those things too. And we're willing to do whatever we need to do or have to do to get those things, right? And we think that we making money, we selling drugs, okay, I'm making all of this money, things is good, but we're killing ourselves in the process. When we're doing these things, we're killing ourselves in the process. And so he goes back to the wolf. What happens, is the wolf gets blamed for trying to have a good meal, but you don't blame the wolf. You blame the hunter for putting the blade in the ice. And that's the same thing in our community when we see the crime that happens in our community that is committed against one another. We have to understand colonialism. We have to understand racism. You know what I'm saying? And it's not to say that we shouldn't get upset and mad at each other. Someone stole, your car, they stole money from you, right? But if we don't understand the source or the origin of that contradiction, then we'll never solve these problems. We'll just be running in circles or trying to get away from our brothers and sisters, right? Without solving the damn problem in the first that created these conditions and created this division amongst us in the first place. So we have to be very clear on that. So just with that being said, man, I'm gonna go through this, and I think we're gonna leave it there. It's a CD. You just get on guard. I have to do. Hey, I'm still having these issues with my internet, man. So I have been doing these podcasts with my phone, but we're gonna get this together. It's just you just get on guard, make eye contact with other men on the train in case the person attacks. We know what to do, but there is no need to initiate aggression against people with issues. Yeah, we know it's kind of like when we in these places, and I think we have to be honest with ourselves. I mean, there's situations where someone can present a danger, and you have to be on guard, right? And there are people who have been attacked. Like that is a reality, But I think like in this particular situation, it's about like this brother is in a chokehold. There's 3 people on him, right? That was a lynching. It's like, yo, we going to trial, without jury, right? We're going to convict this man and sentence him right now, and he was sentenced to death right there for whatever he did, And, the passages said that he was getting, a little unruly and loud. And again, I'm not afraid. I want to be arrested, take me to jail. I want some food, right? But, this man was sentenced to death. He was put in that chokehold, and that man knew what he was doing when he was choking him for 15 minutes. He could care less about that man because it's a black man, unhoused man. Nobody's going to care about him, right? And who really, that guy who committed that murder, he had some mental issues. I couldn't imagine, bro. I mean, I'm not grabbing nobody, choking them to death. I can't imagine. There's something seriously wrong with that guy to grab that unhoused man, right? And murder him. I could see, like, well, anyway, man, it's ridiculous. It's upsetting just thinking about it. When the news talked about the white man who shot up the bank, all I heard about was his mental illness, and the media practically made him out to be a hero because he was increasing. That's crazy, because he was increasing awareness. Oh, we got to do something about these people with mental health problems. Not the evil is this. Oh, you talking about the bank? I thought you were talking about Buffalo man who shot up the bank. Yeah, I don't know if I know that story, but I mean, there's always these cases though. They was questioning the man in Buffalo, his mental health, right? And as they should, these people they're sick with racism. They're sick with colonialism. These are the things that are sick with white supremacy. Serious mental health problems, man. And so colonialism, creates uh these mental health problems that exist in the colonized and the colonizer, right? But they have a different type of mental health issue. So yeah, how many arrests did white man have who shot the black boy for ringing the doorbell? I don't know because they never mentioned it, man. That's something. Yeah, I ain't hear nothing about that. Yeah, I don't know. They said something about what they say about this, or they probably said he was a Marine. He probably a vet or something. I'm trying to recall, but no, we didn't hear any of that information. That's why it's two Americas, man. I keep telling people, maybe three or four, but there's definitely like a white America and there's other Americas, right? Within this. And white America represents the mainstream America, though, man. That's the dominant culture, man. Um, uh, the European here and around the world. Because I don't care if you in the islands or you in South America, you in Europe, or you on the continent of Africa, the European is trying to impose their will on you. They're trying to impose their will on you. I love that Africa though is in a strategic position. I keep saying that because they have the resources right under their feet that um, that everyone needs. The European needs those resources badly, right? So if we can, unite, if we can organize and say, we no longer doing business on your terms, we're going to do business on our terms. This is how we're doing things moving forward, then we'll be in a hell of a position. Um, go through this. Yeah. If the victim had a different racial identity, he isn't going to be seen as some threat. Sadly, it was another black man who held him down. Yeah, I mean, but that's colonialism. That's racism too. We've been affected by these things as well. When it comes to white supremacy, uh, no one is exempt from white supremacy. The Boys talks about the double consciousness. Carter G. Woodson talks about the miseducation of the Negro, right? So these things. France Fanon talks about white. Was a black mask, white skin. Hold on, black mask. Somebody help me, man. Is it white mask, black skin? It's title. Somebody put that title on it. But France Fanon talks about that as well. White mask, black skin. I think it's white mask, black skin. But y'all know what I'm talking about, though. France Fanon goes in, talking about this. This particularly in the French colonies, but I think what happens in the French colonies with Africans striving to be what they call evolve, quote unquote, evolve, especially during colonial times, particularly during colonial times, where they were striving to be French. Wanted to, make sure that they spoke with a particular dialect, right? Wanted to be more French than the French, right? And then there's that alienation, which we was talking about earlier on our podcast with in our analysis of the ISIS papers. But yeah. So that's just something to keep in mind. So this is why we have to understand colonialism, right? Because if we get caught up in just talking about racism, we can be fooled or they can fool us and say, hey, it was a black person that did it, right? Or you have black mayors, you have black city. And so it's like you can't talk that racism stuff because look at all of these black people in these positions of power, right? But we know how racism can still affect the minds of black people. But if we get to the heart of it, though, we get to the heart of it, and we talk about the economic, because at the end of the day, it's like that's what we want. We want power anyway. You know, we're not looking to change your mind and change the way that you view us. If you haven't done it at this point, 500, 600 years, if you haven't done it yet, I'm not waiting another 400 years, 500 years for you to change the way that you view and treat us. Like, I think we be wasting a lot of time doing that. But if we focus on us, black skin, white mask, thank you. You know, we focus on us, we focus on nation building, community control, those sort of things, right? And be able to organize to the point where we can break away. Because we have to get to that point. We have to be organized and unified first, so we can get to a point where, like, hold on, you know, we don't have to be dependent on this government anymore, right? Because that's what it's all about. Like, when it comes to the government is an oppressive state. You know, the government, you know, no matter, you know, who you are, when you're under the control of the state, when we're talking about governments in the state, right? And it's an oppressive system. So there has to be, you know, a point in our life where we want to break away from this state. But we can't do it. I mean, as individuals, we can move, but we still have to deal with global white domination. You know what I'm saying? So it's still like you can't run away from it. But you know, I think like the most strategic thing to do is make sure that we at least build institutions that that are independent, right? So that we can be self-sufficient. And so then there's no excuse for us not to fight for independence. There's no excuses, because what's the reason? You know, there's no other reason to be under a colonial state, right? So, you know, with that being said, man, I'm, you know, talked out, man. I definitely wanted to have this conversation, talk about Jordan Neely, make sure that we say his name. And I think it's important. Jordan Neely is in the news, right? But he's not the only one. And I'm not just talking about, I'm talking about particular, you know, that particular community, the unhoused community, who are under threat. They're a vulnerable population. I was reading maybe a month or two ago how someone was killed in their sleep, you know, hit with a hammer, right? Killed in their sleep. Someone was going around hitting homeless people with hammers in their sleep, you know. So it's a vulnerable population, and the reason why they're in the situation that they're in, and make no mistake, is because of colonialism, right? I can't imagine, you know, African. I haven't read the history of homeless people in Africa. And I'm talking about before this contact with Europeans. I haven't read that history yet. If somebody has some good books to read on unhoused people in Africa, I definitely want to, you know, suggest that to me, right? That's a colonial, you know, imperialist history right there. European colonialism and capitalism. So with that being said, man, like, peace to the chat. Appreciate you guys getting on, sticking with me through, you know, almost this hour. Thanks for lighting up the chat with your comments as well. For anybody who is not subscribed to the channel, make sure you like, share, make sure you subscribe to the channel so we can get these numbers up, man. We're going to keep building. We getting stronger and stronger here at We Charge Colonialism. So big shout out to everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day or night, wherever you are, whatever time zone you in. Peace, family. Oh, what is the yeah, it's if you I could put it in chat, but it's called Black Power by Molly Yesatella. I could put that in the chat too. Yeah, this I mean, I'm not going front, man. I probably done listened to Malcolm X speeches, Ballad of the Bullet, Message to the Grassroots, thousands of times, thousands of times. And those is like some of my, you know, favorite speeches in regard, and I say favorite, you know, because of the analysis that is given in those speeches. The Message to the Grassroots, his last speech. What's the other one? Ballad or the Bullet. And of course, like everything else by Malcolm, but those three in particular, right? And that kind of set me on my journey when I listened to those speeches, because it kind of gave me everything. Well, at least I felt at the time, like I'm like, yo, this is a good foundation to build on. I was already studying, but what was laid out in those speeches, I said, man, this is a good foundation, you know, and it kind of pushed me to want to be an organizer, get into the community, and join the fight for our liberation. But this particular speech, man, by Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Black Power, I'm gonna put it in the chat. The analysis that he gives in this speech, man, I think is like, you know, to me, is my favorite that I've heard by him because of the analysis. Yeah, I'm about to put it in the chat in a second. Should have came. Oh, that's why. All right. Gotta put Black Power in. This speech was given in Philadelphia. It's in the late 1990s. It was after the Million Man March. It was after the Million Women's March as well in Philadelphia when it was given. About to put it in there now. Hey, I promise you, like, you listen to this, you won't be disappointed. You won't be disappointed. I promise you. Put it in the chat. Here we go. Appreciate your patience. Yeah, the speech is on YouTube. There it is. I appreciate your patience. I was trying to work these computers, and I'm working on an old computer. My newest computer, which is kind of old. The internet connects and disconnects for some reason, so I got to call the company and find out what's probably need a wire, but it doesn't do it on my other computer, so that's why it's confusing. But yeah, so check that out. That's the link is in the chat. Check that out. Next time, catch me on the podcast or catch me in the community. I want y'all to tell me what y'all think about this particular speech. Listen to that thing thoroughly. Listen to the analysis. And yeah, let's build on it. Oh, and May 17th, I'm going to do an analysis of the speech as well. So you definitely probably want to join. And, join the discussion too. I bring you up if you want to be a part of the analysis. That's May 17th. So again, appreciate y'all, man. Till next time. Peace.